The North Atlantic, December 1943. A fierce winter storm rages above as the USS Barracuda, America's most advanced submarine, plunges beneath the churning waves. Inside the cramped control room, Captain Robert Hayes grips the periscope handles until his knuckles turn white. His weathered face, illuminated by the dim red glow of battle lights, betrays no emotion to his crew, but his mind races with doubt. Depth charges, starboard side. The sonar operator's voice cracks. German destroyer closing fast. The submarine shudders violently as explosions rock the ocean around them. Pipes burst, showering the engine room with scalding steam. Chief Engineer Marcus Wilson scrambles to contain the damage, ignoring the second-degree burns forming on his forearms. "Take us deeper," Hayes orders, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Show me what this boat can really do." Lieutenant Sarah Winters, the naval architect who helped design the Barracuda's revolutionary propulsion system, exchanges a worried glance with Wilson. They alone know the terrible truth. The submarine's experimental engine was rushed into service without proper testing. Every additional foot of depth is another roll of the dice with 57 lives aboard. The hull groans ominously as they descend past the submarine's certified depth limit. A notebook slips from Winters' pocket, revealing handwritten calculations crossed out and rewritten multiple times. Hayes notices but says nothing. "Captain," Wilson whispers, close enough that only Hayes can hear, "if we go any deeper, I can't guarantee we'll come back up." Hayes nods almost imperceptibly. "That's a risk we'll have to take. The alternative is certain death." As the depth gauge needle continues its relentless clockwise journey, no one aboard realizes they're about to make naval history, not for the achievement they'd hoped for, but for a disaster that will challenge everything they believe about loyalty, sacrifice, and survival. 3 months earlier, at the Naval Research Facility in Newport, Rhode Island, Lieutenant Sarah Winters stood before a panel of admirals. Her presentation on the Barracuda's revolutionary propulsion system met with skeptical stares. The war in the Atlantic had reached a critical juncture. German U-boats were decimating Allied supply convoys despite America's best efforts, and the Navy desperately needed a technological advantage. "Gentlemen, this electromagnetic drive will increase our submarine speed by 40% while drastically reducing noise signatures," Winters explained, her confidence masking the sleepless nights she'd spent refining calculations. "We can outrun and outhide anything in the German fleet." Admiral Donovan, head of the Submarine Warfare Division, leaned forward. "And you're certain it's ready for deployment?" A flicker of doubt crossed Winters' face. "With proper testing protocols, testing takes time, Lieutenant. Time our boys on those supply ships don't have." The Admiral's voice carried the weight of recent casualty reports. "How soon can it be operational?" In the machine shop adjacent to the dry dock, Chief Engineer Marcus Wilson supervised the installation of the experimental drive components. A working-class genius from Pittsburgh's steel mills, Wilson had joined the Navy after Pearl Harbor, bringing decades of practical engineering experience that perfectly complemented Winters' theoretical brilliance. "You're cutting corners, Lieutenant," Wilson warned during a rare private moment, his weathered hands gesturing to incomplete weld seams on the propulsion housing. "I've seen rush jobs before. They kill people." Winters' eyes flashed with anger and something deeper, fear. "You think I don't know that? My brother died on the USS Squalus when its experimental systems failed. I've rechecked everything." Wilson softened. "I didn't know about your brother. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be thorough. Double-check everything I've done." She handed him her notebooks. "I could have missed something." Meanwhile, Captain Robert Hayes visited his wife Eleanor and their 10-year-old son James at their modest naval housing apartment. Hayes stood at the window, watching James play baseball with neighborhood children. "They're giving me the Barracuda," he said quietly. "Experimental submarine. Top secret mission." Eleanor stopped folding laundry. After 15 years of marriage to a submarine commander, she recognized the tone. "What aren't you telling me, Robert?" Hayes turned, the sunset highlighting the new gray at his temples. "It hasn't been properly tested. But if it works? And if it doesn't?" Hayes didn't answer directly. Instead, he pulled a letter from his pocket. "I've written to Senator Pearson about your brother's hardware store. If anything happens, he'll ensure you get the small business loan." That night, as Eleanor slept, Hayes stared at the ceiling, remembering his own commander's sacrifice during his first deployment, deliberately drawing enemy fire to allow Hayes' damaged submarine to escape. Heroism came with terrible cost, a burden Hayes had carried for 12 years. 2 weeks later, the newly commissioned USS Barracuda departed with a hastily assembled crew, a mix of experienced submariners and technical specialists unfamiliar with combat conditions. Winters and Wilson were assigned to the mission as technical advisors, an unusual arrangement that created tension with the regular crew. Lieutenant Commander Jack Thornton, the executive officer, made his resentment clear during the first officers' meeting. "With all due respect, Captain, having civilians aboard compromises our operational security." "They're not civilians, they're naval personnel," Hayes corrected, "and they know this boat better than anyone." "They know the theory," Thornton countered. "Theory doesn't help when depth charges are falling." As the Barracuda conducted sea trials off the coast of Maine, Winters discovered discrepancies between theoretical and actual performance. Late one night, she confided in Wilson in the empty mess hall. "The power draw is 23% higher than calculated," she whispered, sliding her calculations across the table. "The cooling system can't compensate at maximum depth." Wilson studied her figures, his expression grave. "We need to report this." "I already tried. Admiral Donovan says we're proceeding as planned. First patrol leaves in 3 days, direct to the North Atlantic shipping lanes." Their conversation was interrupted by Seaman First Class David Chen, the radio man whose family ran a laundry in San Francisco before being displaced by anti-Chinese sentiment. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, "but Captain wants all officers for a briefing." In the control room, Hayes revealed their true mission: to hunt the German submarine ace Karl Donitz Jr., son of the Grand Admiral, whose wolf pack had sunk 12 Allied vessels in the past month. Intelligence suggested he would be targeting a critical supply convoy bound for England carrying aircraft parts and medical supplies. "This isn't just about sinking enemy submarines," Hayes explained, his finger tracing their patrol route on the map. "If we can demonstrate the Barracuda's capabilities against their best commander, it could change the course of the Atlantic War." As the briefing concluded, Hayes asked Winters to stay behind. Once alone, his professional demeanor cracked slightly. "Level with me, Lieutenant. Will this boat perform as promised?" Winters hesitated, loyalty to her project warring with her conscience. "Sir, there are some concerns with the cooling system at maximum operational depth." Hayes studied her face. "Concerns you've reported?" "Yes, sir. But the urgency of the mission," she trailed off, "outweighs the risks." "I understand." Hayes nodded grimly. "Let's hope we don't have to test those limits." "Hey folks, I'd love to know where in the world you're watching this video from. Drop your location in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how history connects us across the globe. The USS Barracuda's first week at sea revealed the stark division forming within her crew. In the cramped forward torpedo room, Seaman Chen maintained his radio equipment while enduring barbed comments from torpedo officer Lieutenant Williams. "Must feel right at home in these tight quarters, Chen? Like one of those tenements in Chinatown." Williams smirked as he inspected the torpedo tubes. Chen continued his work silently, his face impassive. Later, in the galley, he confided in Wilson. "My father fought in the First World War. Came home with medals. Still had to put American-owned signs in our shop window." Wilson nodded. "War doesn't cure prejudice. Sometimes it just gives it new targets." Meanwhile, Captain Hayes and his executive officer Thornton studied intelligence reports in the captain's quarters, plotting intercept courses for the German Wolfpack. "Our intelligence says Karl Donitz Jr. commands the U-732, Hayes explained, pointing to reported sightings. "He's hunting the Liverpool convoy." Thornton frowned. "We're still 3 days out, even at our enhanced speed. They'll hit the convoy before we arrive." "Not if we take this route." Hayes traced a bold line across the chart, directly through a known minefield. It cuts our time by 30 hours. That's suicide, Captain, Thornton protested. Not with our advanced sonar. Lieutenant Winters assures me it can detect mines at twice the standard range. Thornton's expression darkened. You're putting a lot of faith in her promises. I'm putting faith in American engineering, Hayes corrected sharply. Elsewhere on the submarine, Winters and Wilson worked furiously to address the mounting issues with the propulsion system. During a critical maintenance cycle, Wilson discovered a hairline fracture in the cooling pump. This wasn't in the specifications, he muttered, showing Winters the defect. The pressure tolerances were overstated. Winters examined it with growing horror. The manufacturer cut corners. Wartime production rushing. We need to reduce our maximum operational depth by at least 30%, Wilson insisted. The mission parameters require us to dive deeper than that to evade German sonar, Winters countered, her voice strained. We need solutions, not limitations. Their argument was interrupted by a ship-wide announcement. Battle stations. Minefield detected ahead. In the control room, Hayes ordered the Barracuda to periscope depth. The advanced sonar system painted an alarming picture, dozens of mines in their path, placed in an irregular pattern that defied standard navigation techniques. Sonar isn't performing to specifications, the sonar operator reported nervously. Resolution is degrading below 60 feet. Winters rushed to the sonar station, examining the readings with mounting dread. The electromagnetic drive is causing interference. Something we didn't anticipate in the lab conditions. Hayes's face remained impassive, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped the periscope handles. Can you fix it? Not without shutting down the drive completely, she admitted. Which would leave us dead in the water in a minefield, Hayes concluded. He made his decision quickly. We proceed on visual confirmation only. Reduced speed, Lieutenant Chin on bow watch. For 6 harrowing hours, the Barracuda navigated the minefield with Chun calling out mine sightings from the forward observation blister, a small dome protruding from the submarine's bow normally used only while surfaced. The danger was extreme. A single miscalculation would be catastrophic. When they finally cleared the minefield, the entire crew exhaled in collective relief. Hayes called Winters to his quarters. That was unacceptable, he stated flatly. Your sonar failed exactly when we needed it most. Captain, we're discovering integration issues that couldn't have been predicted without proper testing. I know. Hayes cut her off. Fix it, Lieutenant. Lives depend on it. That night, Winters worked through her exhaustion, eventually falling asleep over her calculations. She dreamed of her brother's submarine, the Squalus, sinking with him trapped inside. She woke with a start to find Wilson standing over her with coffee. I might have a solution, he said, sliding a diagram toward her. If we reroute the electromagnetic shielding and sacrifice some of our speed, we can reduce the interference. Their collaboration was interrupted by a thunderous explosion that rocked the submarine. Klaxons blared as they rushed to their stations. In the control room, Hayes received grim news. They'd been spotted by a German patrol aircraft that had dropped depth charges as a warning and radioed their position to the nearest U-boats. Damage report. Hayes ordered. Minor hull breach in Section 4, contained, reported the damage control officer. But sir, the aft trim tanks are compromised. We're having trouble maintaining depth control. Hayes turned to Winters. I need options, Lieutenant. Before she could respond, sonar reported multiple contacts, 3 German submarines converging on their position. Among them was the distinctive acoustic signature of U-732, Carl Donitz Jr. S command. They're hunting us now, Hayes observed grimly. So much for our element of surprise. What followed was a deadly game of cat and mouse. The Barracuda's superior speed allowed them to outrun the German submarines individually, but coordinated hunting tactics kept forcing them to change course, driving them deeper into enemy waters and farther from their objective. After 30 hours of evasion, the crew was exhausted, and the submarine's systems showed signs of stress from extended high-speed operation. Worst of all, intelligence decoded by Chen revealed a devastating truth. The German submarines weren't just hunting them, They were herding them away from the convoy and toward a waiting destroyer flotilla. In the officers' wardroom, Hayes gathered his senior staff. "We've been manipulated," he admitted. "Donuts recognized our capabilities and adapted." "We should abort," Thornton insisted. "Return to friendly waters while we still can." "And abandon the convoy?" Hayes shook his head. "Thousands of lives and critical war materials depend on us disrupting this wolf pack." "With respect, sir," Winters interjected, "the submarine systems weren't designed for this extended high-performance operation. We're seeing cumulative strain throughout the propulsion system." The ensuing argument divided the officers along predictable lines: those who trusted the new technology versus those who favored conventional tactics. The tension reached its peak when Thornton openly questioned Hayes's judgment. "Is completing this mission worth the lives of everyone aboard?" he demanded. "That's enough, executive officer," Hayes said coldly. "You're dismissed." After Thornton left, Wilson spoke up, his usual reserve broken by necessity. "Captain, there might be a third option. The electromagnetic drive has a theoretical capability we haven't tested, a short-duration power surge that could give us enough speed to break through their cordon and reach the convoy." "At what risk?" Hayes asked. Wilson and Winters exchanged glances. "Critical system failure," she admitted. "But it might be our only chance." Hayes studied the situation map again, the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. "Make the necessary preparations. We move at 0400 hours. As the officers dispersed, Chin approached Hayes privately. "Sir, I intercepted something else. Personal communications between the U-boats." He hesitated. "Carl Donitz Jr. is calling this Operation Vengeance. Intelligence believes his brother was aboard one of the submarines you sank last year." Hayes absorbed this revelation silently, another burden to carry. In his quarters he recorded a log entry, choosing his words carefully for posterity. "We face not just a tactical challenge but a moral one. The technological marvel we command has proven both blessing and curse. I pray the decisions I make in the coming hours honor the trust placed in me by my crew and my country." Hey guys, if you're enjoying this naval thriller, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. We're trying to reach 1,000 subscribers, and your support helps us continue bringing these dramatic historical stories to life. Dawn broke over a deceptively calm North Atlantic as the USS Barracuda prepared for its desperate gambit. In the engine room, Wilson and his team reinforced critical junctions with makeshift bracing, their faces grim with the knowledge that they were pushing the submarine far beyond its design limits. "All hands, secure for extreme maneuvers," Hayes's voice crackled over the intercom. "This will be rougher than anything you've experienced." In the control room, Winters monitored the electromagnetic drive's power levels, her fingers hovering over emergency shutdown controls. The plan was audacious. A 90-second maximum power surge that would propel them at unprecedented speed through the U-boat cordon, followed by an emergency dive to avoid the destroyer flotilla. "Engineering reports ready, Captain," Thornton announced, professional despite his earlier objections. Hayes nodded. "Commence operation." The submarine lurched violently as the electromagnetic drive engaged at full capacity. The hull vibrated at a frequency that set teeth on edge and loosened bolts throughout the vessel. Men clung to whatever handholds they could find as instrument panels sparked and oxygen masks dropped from overhead compartments. Speed increasing, 30 knots, 35. The navigator called out, disbelief in his voice. "Sonar contacts scattering," reported the sonar operator. They didn't anticipate this speed capability. For a moment, triumph flashed across Hayes's face. Then came the sound every submariner dreads, the metallic groan of overstressed hull plates followed by the distinctive ping of rivets shearing under pressure. "Primary cooling system failing," Winters shouted over the cacophony of alarms. "Temperature redlining." "Keep going," Hayes ordered. "We're almost through their line." The submarines surged forward, the deck plates heating beneath their feet as the overtaxed engines converted excess energy to heat. In the cramped forward torpedo room, seawater began spraying through hairline fractures in the hull. "Flood in compartment 6, came the frantic report. We've broken through their cordon, Thornton announced. Destroyers detected ahead, preparing depth charges. Take us deep, Hayes commanded. Maximum operational depth. A horrified silence fell over the control room. Captain, Wilson objected, the cooling system can't. I'm aware of the risks, Chief. Take us down. Now. As the Barracuda angled downward, the pressure gauges climbed inexorably. At 250 feet, the first warning lights illuminated on the damage control panel. At 300 feet, pipes began to leak throughout the vessel. Hull integrity compromised in sections 3 and 7, reported the damage control officer, sweat pouring down his face. Above them, the first depth charges exploded, sending shock waves through the water that rocked the submarine violently. Equipment tore free from insufficient mountings, injuring several crew members. Multiple German destroyers directly above, sonar confirmed. They've got our position locked. More depth, Hayes insisted, even as the submarine groaned in protest. At 400 feet, well beyond the submarine's tested limits, a catastrophic failure in the engine room sent superheated steam billowing through the aft compartments. Wilson and 2 engineers were caught in the blast, suffering severe burns as they fought to contain the damage. In the chaos that followed, Winters made a crucial discovery. The electromagnetic drive is creating a unique acoustic signature, she reported. It's like nothing the Germans have encountered before, but it's making us more detectable, not less. Shut it down, Hayes ordered immediately. Revert to standard propulsion. That will leave us vulnerable, sir, Thornton warned. Standard speed won't outrun those destroyers. We're not outrunning anything in our condition, Hayes replied grimly. Chin, prepare to transmit our coordinates to Fleet Command. If we don't make it, they need to know what happened here. As the electromagnetic drive powered down, an eerie silence fell over the submarine. The regular beat of the conventional diesel engines seemed impossibly quiet after the high-frequency vibration they'd endured. Depth charges have stopped, the sonar operator reported with confusion. Destroyers they're moving away. That doesn't make sense, Thornton muttered. Chen's voice cut through the puzzlement. Sir, intercepted communications, the convoy is under attack. The destroyers have been recalled to defend it. Hayes's expression hardened. That was our mission. Sir, we're in no condition to engage, Thornton objected. Half our systems are compromised. We still have torpedoes, Hayes countered, studying the tactical display. And now we have surprise again. They think we're neutralized. A tense silence fell over the control room as the officers recognized the impossible choice before them: retreat to safety with a critically damaged vessel, or attempt to complete their mission despite the overwhelming odds. In the engine room, Wilson directed emergency repairs, his burned hands wrapped in makeshift bandages as he worked. We can give you one more surge, he reported over the intercom. Maybe 2 minutes at 3/4 capacity. Then the whole system will fail catastrophically. Understood, Chief, Hayes acknowledged. Then, to his officers, plot an intercept course. We'll approach on conventional power, then make one final run using the electromagnetic drive. The submarine can't take that kind of stress again, Winters protested. I'm not asking it to survive, Hayes replied quietly. Just to get us close enough. The gravity of his words settled over the control room. Hayes was proposing what amounted to a suicide mission, driving their crippled submarine into the heart of the wolf pack to disrupt the attack on the convoy. There has to be another way, Thornton insisted. I'm open to suggestions, executive officer. In the tense silence that followed, Chin suddenly straightened at his communications station. Sir, I'm picking up a transmission from the convoy. They've deployed their escort carrier's aircraft. The wolf pack is breaking off the attack. A collective breath of relief passed through the control room, but Hayes remained tense. Confirm that. Multiple German submarines retreating, sonar reported after an agonizing minute. Including U-732. Hayes's shoulders sagged slightly, the first outward sign of the strain he'd been under. Set course for home, he ordered. Best possible speed consistent with our damage. As the Barracuda limped away, however, disaster struck. A catastrophic failure in the makeshift repairs sent the submarine into an uncontrolled descent. Warning klaxons blared as the depth gauge spun past 500 feet, well beyond crush depth for a conventional submarine. "We've lost trim control completely," the diving officer reported, panic edging into his voice. "All ballast systems non-responsive." "Emergency blow all tanks," Hayes ordered, but the damaged air systems produced only a fraction of the necessary pressure. In the horrifying minutes that followed, the submarine continued its descent into the crushing darkness. At 600 feet, hull plates began to buckle inward. The lights flickered and died, leaving only the eerie red glow of emergency lamps. In this moment of extremity, Wilson made a fateful decision. "The electromagnetic drive," he called to Winters across the engine room. "If we reverse the polarity, we could create enough upward thrust to counteract our negative buoyancy," she finished, already moving to the controls. "But the structural integrity won't hold for long," he acknowledged. "But it might buy us enough time to reach a sustainable depth." Together, they implemented the desperate modification, rerouting power from life support systems to generate one final surge from the dying drive system. The submarine shuddered violently, then miraculously began to slow its descent. "We're leveling off at 650 feet, the diving officer reported in disbelief. "Not for long," Wilson warned over the intercom. "The drive housing is rupturing. We have minutes, not hours." In the control room, Hayes faced the grimmest decision of his career. The submarine was trapped in a precarious equilibrium, too damaged to rise on its own, but temporarily prevented from sinking further by the jury-rigged propulsion system that was rapidly destroying itself. "Compartmentalize the boat," he ordered Thornton. "Prepare to evacuate non-essential personnel using the escape trunks." "At this depth?" "That's certain death, sir." "So is staying aboard," Hayes replied, his voice steady despite the horror of the situation. "I need volunteers to remain and operate the vessel." The moment crystallized everything about command that Hayes had learned throughout his career, the terrible loneliness of making decisions that condemned men to death, balanced against the responsibility to save those who could be saved. 6 months later, Lieutenant Sarah Winters stood before another panel of admirals, this time in the somber confines of the Naval Court of Inquiry. The wood-paneled room felt suffocating as she recounted the events leading to what the press had dubbed the Barracuda incident. "The emergency surfacing procedure was unprecedented," she testified, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "Captain Hayes ordered the submarine compartmentalized, with essential personnel remaining in the central section. The electromagnetic drive was reversed to create upward thrust while non-essential compartments were deliberately flooded to create a pressure differential." "Deliberately flooded?" Admiral Donovan leaned forward. "With men still inside?" Winters held his gaze. "No, sir. Captain Hayes ensured all personnel were evacuated to the central compartments before implementing the procedure. But it meant sacrificing 60% of the submarine's structural integrity." The painful memory surfaced unbidden, Hayes sealing himself in the flooding control room after ensuring the override controls were set, giving the remaining crew their only chance of survival. His final order still echoed in her mind, "Tell them we tried something new." In the hospital ward across town, Chief Engineer Marcus Wilson underwent his 7th surgery for the burns that covered 40% of his body. In the bed beside him, Seaman Chen recovered from decompression sickness that had left him partially paralyzed. Of the 57 crew members who had sailed on the Barracuda, only 22 had survived. "They're calling us heroes," Chen remarked bitterly during their shared physical therapy. "Heroes don't lose 35 men." Wilson adjusted his position, wincing at the pain. Hayes knew the risks. "We all did." "Did we? Really?" Chen challenged. "You and Winters were raising alarms from the beginning." Wilson had no answer. The guilt of his own complicity, the compromises made, the warnings unheeded, weighed on him as heavily as his physical injuries. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Eleanor Hayes received the Navy Cross on behalf of her husband, posthumously promoted to full commander. 10-year-old James stood beside her in his Sunday best, stoically accepting condolences from officials who spoke of sacrifice and duty in rehearsed platitudes. Later that night, Eleanor found James in Robert's study, examining his father's service photographs. "Was Dad brave?" the boy asked simply. Eleanor sat beside him, choosing her words carefully. "Your father was something rarer than brave. He was responsible. He accepted the consequences of his decisions, even the hardest ones. Lieutenant Winters says he saved them all." "Yes," Eleanor nodded. "But that's not why he did it." "Then why?" "Because it was his duty. Not just to his mission or his country, but to the men who trusted him." Across the Atlantic, Grand Admiral Karl Donitz received the after-action report on the Barracuda encounter. His son, having survived the engagement, stood at attention as his father reviewed the findings. "They sacrificed their most advanced submarine to protect a supply convoy," the elder Donitz observed. "A poor strategic exchange." "With respect, Father, I disagree," his son replied. "Their willingness to make such sacrifices indicates a resolve we should not underestimate." The admiral studied his son thoughtfully. The encounter with the American submarine had changed him, made him more contemplative, less aggressive in his tactics. Perhaps there were lessons in defeat that victory could never teach. Back in the United States, the Naval Research Department had already begun implementing lessons from the Barracuda disaster. Testing protocols were overhauled, with Winters appointed to head a new safety oversight committee. Her first act was to institute a requirement that all designers must serve aboard vessels using their innovations, a policy that came to be known as the Hayes Principle. 3 weeks after the inquiry concluded, Winters visited Wilson in the Rehabilitation Center. The engineers had formed a bond forged in shared trauma and mutual respect that transcended their professional relationship. "They're building another one," she informed him, placing a set of blueprints on his lap. "Incorporating everything we learned. They want you to consult." Wilson studied the designs with his good hand. "They've addressed the cooling system issues. And the hull reinforcement is based on your emergency modifications," she finished. "The ones that saved 19 lives, including mine." Wilson's expression darkened. "And Hayes? What about his modifications?" "Those too," she admitted. "The emergency surfacing protocol is now standard training for all submarine crews. They're calling it the Hayes maneuver." Wilson turned to the window, watching rain streak down the glass. Cold comfort for Eleanor and the boy. "I visited them last week," Winters said quietly. "She's reopening her brother's hardware store with that loan Hayes arranged. The boy talks about joining the Navy someday. God help us if we're still at war then." The conversation lapsed into contemplative silence, two survivors carrying the weight of decisions made and lives lost. Neither had escaped unscathed. Winters suffered from insomnia and panic attacks, while Wilson faced years of reconstructive surgeries and chronic pain. Yet both had already agreed to return to service once cleared by medical. Across the country, the families of those lost with the Barracuda struggled with their own aftermath. In Milwaukee, Torpedo Officer Lieutenant Williams' widow received his personal effects, including a letter he had written the night before the disaster. In it, he confessed his treatment of Chen and other non-white crew members, expressing regret that might never be conveyed in person. In Philadelphia, Executive Officer Thornton's parents maintained a small shrine in their living room, centered around their son's photograph in uniform. Though officially commended for his actions during the crisis, Thornton had died believing he had failed his captain by questioning orders that ultimately proved necessary. His father, a World War I veteran, understood the burden his son had carried. 6 months after the disaster, the survivors gathered for the commissioning of the USS Hayes, a new class of submarine incorporating the hard-won lessons of the Barracuda. Admiral Donovan delivered a speech that acknowledged, for the first time publicly, the rushed deployment that had contributed to the tragedy. "War demands terrible compromises," he admitted to the assembled crew and families. But never again at the expense of proper testing and preparation. The men of the Barracuda paid too high a price for that lesson. After the ceremony, Winters found herself standing beside Eleanor Hayes, both women watching as the new submarine's crew boarded for their maiden voyage. Robert would have mixed feelings about this, Eleanor observed. He never wanted to be remembered for a disaster. That's not what they're commemorating, Winters replied. It's his decision, the impossible choice he made that saved lives when all seemed lost. Eleanor studied her thoughtfully. You still blame yourself. Winters didn't deny it. I knew the system had flaws. I should have insisted on more testing, refused the deployment. And how many convoy ships would have been lost? How many thousands of soldiers would have gone without supplies? Eleanor shook her head. Robert understood the calculus of war. So do you. As the new submarine departed, Winters considered the complex legacy of the Barracuda. The disaster had transformed submarine warfare doctrine, accelerated safety protocols, and paradoxically, advanced the very technology that had failed so catastrophically. The electromagnetic drive, refined and properly tested, would eventually become standard on all American submarines, providing the decisive advantage they had originally sought. Later that year, as the tide of the Atlantic War turned in favor of the Allies, Wilson recovered enough to accept a teaching position at the Naval Academy. His first lecture to wide-eyed cadets began not with technical specifications or engineering principles, but with a simple question: what is the purpose of technological superiority in warfare? After listening to various answers about strategic advantage and force multiplication, Wilson shook his head. The purpose of every technological advance is to bring more of our people home alive. The moment we forget that, the moment we prioritize capability over survivability, we dishonor those we've lost. Among his students that day was a young officer who had served briefly under Captain Hayes on a previous deployment. After class, he approached Wilson. Sir, I sailed with Captain Hayes on the Bonita. He always said that no technology could replace good judgment. Wilson nodded slowly. He was right. And in the end, his judgment saved 19 lives, including mine. But at the cost of his own, the student observed. That's the burden of command, Wilson replied. One I hope you understand if you ever bear it. As America's submarine force incorporated lessons from the Barracuda disaster, a subtle but profound shift occurred in naval culture. Technical innovation remained vital, but not at the expense of thorough testing. The rush to deploy untested systems, once accepted as a necessary risk of wartime, gave way to a more measured approach that balanced urgency against safety. By war's end, Admiral Donovan personally presented Eleanor Hayes with her husband's complete service record, finally declassified. It revealed something she had long suspected. Robert had volunteered the Barracuda for its dangerous mission, despite knowing the risks of the untested systems. His final log entry, recovered from the submarine's partially salvaged data recordings, provided the explanation. Technology fails. Systems fail. Materials fail. But the measure of leadership is ensuring that when failure comes, as it inevitably will, it is the leader who bears its full weight, not those who serve under him. If these words are being read, I have succeeded in that final duty. The Barracuda's legacy extended far beyond its brief service. The hard lessons purchased with the lives of 35 men influenced submarine design and operational doctrine for decades. The Hayes principle of designer accountability became standard not just in naval development but eventually throughout the military-industrial complex. For Sarah Winters, vindication came in the form of the next generation of electromagnetic drive systems, thoroughly tested, properly cooled, and remarkably reliable. When she finally retired from naval service in 1962, she had overseen the development of propulsion systems that powered the nuclear submarine fleet without a single catastrophic failure. Marcus Wilson never fully recovered from his injuries, but his contribution to naval engineering earned him the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1955. The textbook he authored, Engineering Ethics in Military Applications, became required reading at service academies. And young James Hayes, true to his childhood declaration, eventually joined the Navy. He served with distinction aboard submarines throughout the Cold War, rising to the rank of captain, though he declined promotion to admiral, preferring to remain in active command at sea. His crews noted that he began every patrol by gathering his officers in the wardroom and telling them the story of his father and the USS Barracuda, a reminder that the most advanced technology was worthless without the human judgment to use it wisely. The legacy of the USS Barracuda and its crew transcends the technological advances and policy changes it inspired. In the quiet memorial garden at the Naval Submarine Base in New London, Connecticut, a simple bronze plaque bears the names of the 35 men who did not return. Beside it stands a sculpture of a periscope emerging from stylized waves, a reminder that beneath the ocean's surface, courage and sacrifice often remain unseen. The Barracuda's story reveals an eternal truth about warfare and innovation. Behind every technological leap, every strategic advantage, are human beings making impossible choices in unforgiving circumstances. Captain Hayes's final decision, to sacrifice himself so others might live, represents the highest tradition of naval service, a standard against which leadership continues to be measured. In times of national crisis, the pressure to deploy untested weapons and systems remains as strong today as it was in 1943. The Barracuda disaster stands as a warning of the costs of rushing innovation and a testament to the resilience of those who survive to implement hard-won lessons. Perhaps the most profound legacy is not technological but moral, the recognition that human judgment, integrity, and sacrifice ultimately determine the success or failure of any military endeavor. As Admiral Chester Nimitz observed at the 10-year memorial service, machines may win battles, but people win wars. If you've been moved by this account of courage and sacrifice, please subscribe to our channel for more untold stories from history's greatest conflicts. Share this video with anyone interested in naval history, engineering challenges, or the human element of warfare. And don't forget to hit that notification bell to join us for our upcoming series on the most influential naval innovations that changed the course of modern warfare. Remember, history's greatest lessons often come from its darkest moments, and the USS Barracuda's story remains one of the most powerful examples of how failure, properly understood, paves the way for future success.